I have a short script to read. We'll call the meeting to order. This is a board meeting of the SCV GSA Board of Directors. So let's all please stand, and Mr. Jason Gibbs, would you recite the Pledge of Allegiance, and everyone else please stay silent.
BJ, I'd be happy to. Ladies and gentlemen, if you please put your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
Of course.
Okay, here are the announcements that I must make. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with the authorizations and requirements contained in Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-2920, signed on March 17, 2020. Board and staff, please mute all of your devices until you are ready to speak to avoid feedback, echoing, and background noise. Make sure you unmute when speaking and remute when you are done speaking. All board members, please turn on your cameras during the meeting. Staff, please turn on your cameras when speaking and turn them off when you are done speaking. Board members will be advised to use the raise hand feature in Zoom when action and discussion items are presented. I will call on each of you when it is your turn to speak. The public may comment on items covered on the agenda during item 1.3 or may do so at the time each is considered and will be limited to 3 minutes per comment. To participate in public comment from your computer, tablet, or smartphone, when I announce the agenda item you wish to speak on, click the raise hand feature in Zoom. You will be notified when it is your turn to speak. Please unmute when requested. Please do not turn on your camera unless you are speaking during public comment, and then please turn them off when you have completed your comments. To participate in public comment via phone, when I announce the agenda item you wish to speak on, dial *9 to raise your hand. Phone participants will be called on by the last 2 digits of their phone number. When it is your turn to speak, dial *6 to unmute. When you are finished with your public comment, staff will remute you. Please be familiar with the last 2 digits of your phone number. We will use the following procedure for approving items and taking public comment. I will introduce each agenda item. I will ask for the questions from the board members, so please raise your hand. I will then call for public comments. The board may then ask additional questions and discuss further if necessary, including public comments if desired. Once concluded, I will ask for a motion and a second. After any further discussion, the board secretary will call for roll call votes. Any PowerPoints that will be shown at today's meeting can be viewed on the SCV GSA website tomorrow. And now I'm going to pass it to Uni for taking roll.
When I call your name, please respond by saying present. Director Biden, are you present?
Present.
Director Cooper, are you present?
Present.
Director Gibbs, are you present?
Present.
Thank you. Director Gutzeit, are you present?
Present.
Director Martin, are you present?
Present.
Vice President Natoli, are you present?
Present.
And President Atkins, are you present?
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum. I turn it back to you, President Atkins.
Okay, very good. We are on to 1.3, public comment. So let's see, caller. All right, so do we have any public comment, Uni, or anything that's not on the agenda?
It does not look like we have any public comment at this time.
Thank you. So now we move on to 1.4, approval of the agenda.
Martin moves approval.
Natoli second.
Okay, Mr. Martin moved, and Vice President Natoli, or Vice Chair Natoli, was the second. Is there any further discussion? Any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and roll call, Uni.
Director Biden, your vote?
Yes.
Director Cooper, your vote?
Yes.
Director Gibbs, your vote?
Aye.
Director Gutzeit, your vote.
Yes.
Director Martin, your vote.
Yes.
Vice President Natoli, your vote.
Aye.
And President Atkins, your vote.
Yes,
Thank you.
it is approved. And the consent calendar, entertain a motion for that.
So moved, Director Cooper.
Good side seconds.
Okay, Cooper Goodsite, first and second on the motion. Any discussion on the part of the board regarding the consent calendar? Any public comment?
There is no public comment.
All right, go ahead and roll call vote, please, Uni.
Director Biden, your vote.
Yes.
Director Cooper, your vote.
Yes.
Director Gibbs, your vote.
Aye.
Director Gutzeit, your vote.
Yes.
Director Martin, your vote.
Yes.
Vice President Natoli, your vote.
Aye.
President Atkins, your vote.
Yes,
Thank you. The consent calendar has passed.
moving on to item 3.1, Mr. Cole, you are up.
Yes, thank you, President Atkins. Good to see everybody, board members. Steve Cole, I'm the one that gets the pleasure of doing some of the executive director duties for the SCV GSA. So nice to see everybody. This item, I'll give a brief introduction, but it's really for board consideration. It has to do with the potential of the board adopting a rotating schedule for board leadership. We've talked about this a couple of times at past meetings. And so what we've presented for you here today in the board packet is a suggested schedule for that rotation. There seemed to be interest amongst the board to have a rotating schedule. We've also listed the board leadership as it's been to date for the SCV GSA. So this is up for board discussion. The recommendation really would be to, if you're all comfortable with it, to approve the schedule, which would set that for the next 5 years. With that, that's all I had to present, and be happy to answer any additional questions.
Are there any questions from the board?
Vice President Natoli, and then following would be Director Martin.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Not a question so much as perhaps a suggestion on the proposed schedule. I'm a planner, not a politician, so I'm not sure how this will come across, but instead of having Santa Clarita Valley Water appointed directors 4 in a row, how about interspersing? So it'd be SCVWA1 and then LA Waterworks, and then SCVWA2 and City of Santa Clarita, SCVAW3, WA3, and then LA County Regional Planning, and then the 4th one. So there's a switch off. So we're not always having all Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency folks for such a long time, president and vice president. Again, I'm a planner, not a politician, but it just seems it's there's the appearance of it being more balanced, I think, if we're interspersed.
President Atkins, you're muted.
Thank you. Was it?
And just one more thing to add, and I am more than happy to start 2021 with I don't really care how things have gone in the past. So if we wanted to start 2021 with SCVWA1, and then the second, and then the vice president would be LA Waterworks. So we'd start that for 2021, just starting anew. That's just my proposal.
I think it's a very good idea. Thank you.
Okay. I'm trying to understand. Are we going
Sure.
into an election right now?
Until June.
not till June.
The idea, President Atkins, we do have an agenda item later in the agenda actually set the position. So the idea was to have the board consider a schedule first, and then we can do the actual seating of the president and vice president later in the agenda today. But it would basically follow the schedule that you're adopting, you're considering right now.
Got it. Okay. Any further discussion from the board?
We have Director Martin next.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, President Atkins. Vice President Natoli, I agree with your proposal and your comments. I was just looking at the little spreadsheet that was put together as part of the staff report that lists all the positions. And of course, we know who the president in the first 2 years, we know who the president is now. So you can kind of associate actual names with the SCV WA1 and at least two of them, former President Cooper, Director Cooper, and President Atkins. And that leaves myself and Director Goodside. But I have a little issue with the way it was proposed in terms of the actual filling in of the blocks. Let's say, for instance, that SCVWA was Director Cooper, who was president in the 17-18 year, and then in the 19 year, he wouldn't be president again in 22. So, and again, I'm referring to the staff report, item 3.1. And then SCV2 wouldn't be president in 2019, because of course that was Director Cooper who was president. So that would be crossed out. And I continue down to SCV3, which is was vice president in 19 and 20. That would turn out to be President Atkins, who would then not be president in 24. So if we can make some corrections to this such that we get things in the proper sequence, I absolutely support it, but it would be helpful if we could, and I agree with Vice President Natoli that we should intersperse other positions, not have SCV Water 1, 2, 3, and 4. It'd be helpful if we put names in while we have people actually seated in those spots so that we know at least who we're talking about the time we vote on this, understanding for a while that those names could change. So that, to me, for SCV 2 and 4, that leaves it up between myself and Director Goodside. I would be very happy to have Director Goodside in the SCV4, which would make her vice president this year, as Vice President Natoli becomes president, then Maria would be vice president, and then Maria would be president in 22. I just kind of wrote that in, but again, this gets kind of into the weeds. I understand that, but it'd be nice if it was accurately presented as opposed to what we have. But hopefully I made myself understood, but those are my comments. And I support going with the rotational plan. I support scattering the names a little bit better than we have as Vice President Natoli recommended.
If I may just take a second, because this was the struggle as we kind of worked through this, Director Martin. We were trying to be careful not to actually use names. And the chart is not to present it as a names thing, but a position thing. So that each agency could have the ability to, choose who they would like without locking it into a specific representative, for instance.
So then as a counter proposal, could we at least have a dated chart with the, let's say, SCV number, and then in parentheses, the name of the person that occupied that seat on the date that the chart was basically published?
Sure. Yeah. Definitely. We could put, since we're showing in this chart right now, kind of the past and the future. I guess it's up to the board if they would like to actually have, as you're proposing, names in those future years.
Again, I don't have a problem with a generic chart with no names, but it'd be nice to have a dated chart at the time of an election so that we know who was seated at the time we voted or the time we made the appointment.
Other comments from the board?
Director Goodside has her hand up.
Yeah, I would agree with all the comments made so far. For adding clarity to this, it is interesting where I think when you start to put the names down, it looks, at least by my read, different than you would assume. And then is the intent of Director Martin's comment that the vice president become president the following year? Is that the intent? Okay, I see heads nodding. I wanted to make sure I understood that. And if we're it seems like the rotation is going back and forth between SCV water and non-SCV water. I guess I don't understand what that would look like if it changes, but I'm open for more equity if it needs to change, but it looks to me like they're swapping back and forth. So maybe I missed that. That was all. I agree with what people have requested.
Mr. President, this is Vice President Natoli. I'm wondering if I can have the ability, Ms. Kang, if you could show that chart and then I can mark it up. Perhaps I can explain a little better to Director Goodside what that would look like.
Sure, I can bring that up. Let me go on the internet real quick.
Sure. I'm not sure if I'm a host where I can mark it up.
Actually, Vice President Natoli, if you have it up, you can share your screen anytime.
I do not have it up on the
Okay.
iPad
Okay, let me go ahead and
computer.
get that up. Give me one moment, please.
I haven't figured out how to do all of that yet on the iPad. And Director Goodside, I'm hoping I understand your question correctly.
There you go.
And I don't see that I don't see that I'm also a host. If you could make me a host, then I can mark.
Sure. 1 second here. Vice President Natoli, you are now co-host.
All right, let me find that where I'm able to mark it up. It is not coming up on my iPad. So, shoot.
Yeah, I think you would have to share your screen if you wanted to personally mark it up.
Yeah, I haven't had to do that in the past.
Yeah. Maybe because it's a webinar and not a Zoom meeting. That might
That
be
could
one of the
be, yes.
reasons.
Yes, that could be. So just perhaps then just as explanation. So for 2021, the president would be, it doesn't have to be me. Again, we could start with, as far as I'm concerned, we could start with SCV WA4 as president. So, and then the vice president would be, say, LA Waterworks. Then LA Waterworks in 2022 would become the president and SCV WA1 would become the vice president. So I'm sorry, I wish I could mark it up. So instead of being in the order that it is now, SCVWA 1, 2, 3, 4, it would be SCVWA 1. The next on the list would be LA Waterworks. Number 3 on the list would be SCVWA 2. And then it'd be City of Santa Clarita, then SCVWA 3, then LA County Regional Planning, and then SCVWA 4. So we're alternating between Santa Clarita Valley water people and non-Santa Clarita Valley water people. So only once every, what's that going to be, 4 years would Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency have both the president and the vice president at the same time. Otherwise it would be.
Director Natoli, I think maybe there's just a misunderstanding on the chart.
I think they did that, yeah.
Although the SCV Water Agency is listed 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see in the actual boxes that only one is being in a leadership position each year going out.
Right, and I think it's helpful if it's interspersed. It also,
yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure it was clear that, you know, it wasn't having 2 in 1 year. It was spread out over the 5 years.
Right. So I'm not sure, Director Goodside, if that answered your question or if
it did. That actually wasn't what I was thinking. I think Steve Cole is still reading my mind after all these years, because I was saying that the officer positions are roughly swapping back and forth between SCV water and non-SCV water, but you were talking about the order on the left, which is not what I was thinking. So I was going for swapping back and forth between agencies in officer positions. And one question on the naming, looking at the boxes below, you have Cooper in 17, 18, and then Cooper in 19, but you have SCV 1, SCV Water 1 and SCV Water 2. Are those both Cooper, Mr. Cole, or what happened between 18 and 19? That was the other.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that's what's causing some of the confusion here, is that the seats, it's not the person, it's the seats.
Okay.
So that's how we try to represent it here.
Okay.
We could very easily do it the other way if that helps eliminate the confusion. But yeah, in this schematic here, Director Cooper was SCVA 1 and SCVA 2.
Okay. So I agree with the way, I mean, at least with what Director Martin said, is just put the names after the ones that already were. If we're trying to sprinkle that amongst the seats evenly. And then I don't know what the solution is going forward, but it's more clear now what Director Natoli was talking about.
President Atkins, I think you have a couple other questions.
Okay. Who else has their hands raised, Jeannie?
We have Director Martin, followed by Director Cooper.
Go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Director Martin, you're on mute.
Okay, that better? All right, I appreciate Vice President Natoli saying she doesn't have to be, but I certainly would support, since he's vice president this year, the continuance of a sequence where the vice president one year becomes the president next year, in which case she should be president if you were going to follow that sequence this year in 21. And then we would have a new vice president, which, according to the way Steve put it together, LA Waterworks becomes vice president, or rather, oh, that's right. Maria becomes vice president as SCVWA 4. And then the following year, Maria becomes president and LA Waterworks becomes VP. I just to follow the sequence of VP to president, Vice President Natoli should be the president in the 21 year, be my opinion, but that's it.
Go ahead.
Was that for me?
Yes. Mr.
Okay.
Cooper, go ahead.
You know, I think Steve has, what we'd like to do is to intersperse these so that it's not the water agency 4 times in a row. And maybe for today, we go ahead at the item that's later on and go ahead and put Vice President Natoli in as president and Director Goodside in as vice president, and then work out all the details of how it intersperses in there later on. I think Steve could come back with it for us.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that actually may be a good suggestion. That way we don't get too hung up on the chart. We can bring it back. And I've heard some really good suggestions here that I think I can capture to make it clear of, you know, who's where and when.
Yeah.
And so we could do that and not have to get hung up on taking action on the chart at this meeting.
Right.
And we'll just follow up with the direct elections on agenda item number 4 today.
Yeah, and then we can get out of the details of this.
Right. That's a better suggestion. So then we can move on to 3.2. Correct?
Why don't you take public comment on this
Yes,
item since we did
thank you.
discuss it?
Public comment?
It does not look like we have public comment at this time. Oh, wait just a moment. We have one. Let me go ahead and share the clock. Ms. Fortner, whenever you're ready.
I just had a question. So is this public comment on 3.1 or 3.2?
This will be public comment on 3.1.
Okay.
Correct.
Then I am saving it for 3.2. Thank you.
We
So
have
then
one,
we don't have.
we
don't
have one
any-
more public
one more?
comment.
Okay, go ahead. On 3.1, go ahead.
Ms. Cattell, whenever you're ready.
Hi, everybody. It appeared to me that the only thing that needed to be ameliorated in that chart was that if you had Director Goodsite be vice president next year, or this year rather, that next year she'd be president. That was the only change that I could see, and that would fix everything. Thank you.
Okay. Any other further public comment?
It looks like there's no more public comment.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and
Thank you.
move on then to 3.2.
Right, okay.
I guess
And
I'm-
you're supposed to come pick me up.
Okay. Go ahead and,
Would you like me to introduce the item?
yes, please.
President Atkins?
Yes, please, Mr. Cole, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, President Atkins. This item, we've talked about at a couple previous GSA board meetings. It was the desire of the board to look at the potential of adjusting the norms and expectations of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee to specifically address the ability of whether that a Stakeholder Advisory Committee member could use that position as a stated purpose on election materials. And so Mr. Bunn had prepared an updated norms and expectations resolution. You'll see that in your packet, as well as a signatory memo that would be signed by the Stakeholder Advisory Committee members as part of their requirement for participation. I don't have any additional items, but happy to answer any questions. And I know Mr. Bunn is on the line to answer questions as well.
Go ahead, Mr. Bunn.
Well, I just wanted to point out that it was a little bit different structure than we were contemplating at the last regular meeting because the norms and expectations were adopted by resolution. So we need to change them by resolution as well. And a resolution is not normally a document that anyone signs beside the president. It's an action taken by the board and not by anybody else. So that's why there's two documents instead of one.
Okay, understood. Any comments on the part of the board on this agenda item 3.2?
Yes, President Atkins. I think we discussed this quite a bit at the last GSA board meeting and the need for this. It's unfortunate, but we do need to put this into place. And I think what Mr. Bunn has put together here takes care of any issues that we would have with this. So I appreciate what you've done, Mr. Bunn, and I certainly support this.
Thank you. Any other board members? Care to comment or question? Hearing none, I too believe that this achieves the intent, and it is something that's needed, and I too support it. So now we're going to open it to public comment. If no other board members have any questions or comments.
We do have
Uni,
one public. We do have one public comment.
Go ahead, Uni.
Go ahead, Ms. Planbeck, with your public comment.
Okay. I'm sorry. I do not agree that this is something that's needed. The board was not politicized in any way. There was no personal gain, and it's definitely targeted at one particular stakeholder member, obviously. And, two of you on the board ran in the same race that she did. So it looks like retaliation. And I think it's very ethically unsound of you, and it's probably illegal. And I would just like to read a few notes from what you cannot do as an oath of employment. You may not infringe on First or 14th Amendment rights. Employment may not be conditioned on an oath that one has not engaged in or will not engage in protected speech activities. Employment may not be conditioned on an oath denying past or abjuring future association activities protected by the Constitution. An oath must not be so vague that persons of ordinary intelligence must guess at its meaning. Now, to tell someone that they cannot put in their ballot materials what they have spent a lot of time doing is a little bit insulting to them. I mean, you asked all these stakeholders to volunteer their time to participate in this, and then they are not supposed to say anything about the amount of time they have spent or the information they have learned from it. I mean, come on. And I also think, although you legally can put your name on something, because even though it's not a full-time job, you can do that because that's your position, even though you're appointed, not elected. I think that it's very unfair to tell someone else they can't do the same thing. It's unfair. It may be legal, but it's unfair. And that's what you're saying. I can do it, but you cannot. And particularly with how obnoxious you were to use that ballot designation to run against me. So I'm just saying, I mean, obviously there was no intended personal gain. People don't run for office for personal gain, even though Director Gutzeit brought this up. And I also want to mention that Director Gutzeit said she was going to abstain from this, but in fact, she already participated in the discussion of it, and she did not leave the room during the vote or during the discussion. So she has already joined in participating in this action. And I just think it's ethically wrong, and it looks really bad. So I ask you all to reconsider this. I don't think you can legally do it. And I think that you may be opening yourself up for problems, both of what people perceive you to be doing and legal problems. Thank you.
Other public comments, Uni?
Yes, there's one more public comment. Go ahead, Ms. Faulkner.
Hi, I just want to say that in reading over this document, at first I had to laugh because it to me, it looks like something that an elementary school teacher would put on a report card as teacher notes, like Stacy demonstrates good manners, Stacy agrees to this, Stacy agrees to that, Stacy's fun to work with, Stacy gets along well with others. I just found this to be profoundly punitive in nature, definitely retaliatory against me. And even though that you are putting this before the entire advisory committee, we know who this is for and who this is about. And I vehemently disagree that I get it, you're mad. You know, elections have consequences, votes have consequences. I get it. You're upset. You're mad. But to try to take away my, or to try to violate my civil rights and my constitutional rights is just, it's wrong. And I think that there are some of you on this board that recognize exactly what's going on here, and you realize just how wrong this is. I'll yield back my minute and 30 seconds, but I would ask you all to seriously take a look at this and see if this isn't something that's in absolute retaliation against something that you did not like the outcome of. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the part of the board?
I have a question, or yeah, Director Atkins.
Go ahead.
Mr. Bunn, was this reviewed as far as the issue stated that is it legal to do this proposal?
In my judgment, yes. I don't think that there's a First Amendment, well, there's limits to First Amendment rights, and if incorrectly stating that something is a principal activity, there's no First Amendment right to do that. And I don't know that it's a protected interest of employment either. There's no employment going on here. So, I mean, some people could differ with portions of that, but that's my opinion.
Thank you.
And I will tell you, the elections code is crystal clear, and it was violated in my opinion. And we're just going to leave it where it is and put it to a vote on the part of the board.
President Atkins, Vice President Natoli, followed by Director Cooper, has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Director Vice President Natoli.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I apologize. I have no idea who or what this is about. I don't know who I'm supposed to be mad at. I'm not mad at anybody. Looking at this in a very narrow way. I would like to ask our counselor, Mr. Bunn, this is supposed to be directed specifically at the ballot designation, correct? So what is put on the ballot as the person's occupation, correct?
Yes, but also there's a restriction on using it in campaign materials.
Right. Can we be clear? And again, I think this gets back to what's a ballot designation. And I don't know that everybody knows what a ballot designation is. I did not before we started looking into this. Could we make sure that this is clear, that you just can't, you can say in your ballot, you could say in your campaign materials that you volunteer for the stakeholder advisory committee, but you can't say that's your job. Is there a way to clarify?
Yes, if I may, and this was, as you recall, I'm sorry, Vice President Natoli.
I know there's too much of a delay, but you understand my point. Please go ahead.
Okay, first of all, there was a legal memo which did explain what the ballot designation is, but I'm happy to say that again. When anyone runs for elective office, they have the option of putting in a ballot designation, and that's the term that's used in the statute. And so that's why it says ballot designation here, even though it may not be clear to a layperson what that is. But it's something that you can put on the ballot along with your name, which designates your principal profession or occupation. There is a provision in the elections code that says that you can use a nonprofit or volunteer position for that as long as it is your principal occupation, not in the sense of employment, but that what you spend the majority of that time on. And you must, there's conditions on it. You have to spend a significant amount of time on that activity, and there can't be any other occupation that you have. If you're employed somewhere, you have to write down what you're employed. But if you're not employed, then you can use this nonprofit designation. Did that answer your question? I may have gotten a little away from it.
Just a little. I'm just wondering if there's a way we can include perhaps a little more language, because I do believe that this is important to include for whatever the reason is. But I do believe it's important to include this. Just that clarifies what a ballot designation is and what we're strictly saying and specifically saying cannot be done. This is very brief, but it may not be explanatory enough.
Would it help to use the word official on the basis of an official ballot designation? I'm just
perhaps
brainstorming here.
Sure, perhaps the other directors can weigh in on this as well. Official, perhaps official, or
as defined in the election code.
As defined in the code, yes.
Right.
That's probably the best wording to use.
Mr. Cooper?
Well, I'm sorry that we're having to do this. You expect that when people run for public office, that they will be honest and ethical up front. And what we had in the last election was not. This is not a profession. This is not where somebody gets their livelihood. In fact, those people have been on the ballot before and put themselves down as IT specialists and other occupation, but all of a sudden they're groundwater sustainability advisors. They're not. They're a stakeholder advisor of the community. And so I think we need this. If we want to put in their official ballot designation, that's fine. At the end of it, where it says, or include in campaign materials, we may want to say something in there of portraying this as a occupation or profession, because that's not an occupation or profession. So I certainly think that we need to move ahead with it. If we need to refine the wording a little bit, that's fine. But I think that the people that are on that stakeholder advisory committee in signing the ethics and the norms and ethics, it's important. If they don't want to sign it, that's fine. And then they don't have to serve on the committee. That's the way it's set up. Thank you.
And I agree with adding the language about the elections code, pursuant to the elections code. That would be, I think that would strengthen its own. And I agree with Mr. Cooper. And I think this is definitely needed because we did have some clear misunderstanding of how the elections code is to apply, and it was not applied correctly in my opinion, but I just think we should go forward. If there's nothing further from the board.
Yes, President Atkins, I had my hand up, so.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Listen, I have no problem with prohibiting the use of the position as a ballot designation. I think anybody who's run for office understands what a ballot designation is. If we need to explain that further, we should. However, I think to add the words in the document or include it in campaign materials, I believe that goes too far. Anybody that serves on a committee like this should be able to at least include it in some of their biographical information. To say we can't include it in campaign materials, I think goes beyond the point of you can't use this as a ballot designation. I think those are two very distinct things, different things. And I would support striking the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words from the 5th bullet under in the resolution.
Go ahead, Ms. Goodside.
2 quick notes. I know that we are currently advertising for stakeholder members. So this is open to all current and potential future stakeholder members. So it's quite a broad action. And secondly, I am supportive of either Director Martin's strike or the clarification that it shall not be used as a profession or occupation in campaign materials. One of the two. I think we do list volunteer activities. Although I will say I've served on the Assemblywoman's Committee and was prohibited from mentioning it without her permission. So it could go either way. I'm inclined to be most strict on the ballot designation and maybe not let it be listed as a profession or occupation otherwise. But so I'm kind of in the middle on that second part. Definitely supportive of the first. Thank you.
Yes, I tend to agree with Director Martin's comment about other campaign materials. The ballot designation is off limits because it's clearly articulated in the elections code. And I think we ought to add the language on the elections code, but those are my comments. Anything further from the board?
We have Vice President Natoli.
And just a clarification on that, I think we do need to say something about not being able to use your ballot designation use it as a ballot designation in campaign materials. I don't see anything wrong with someone putting in campaign materials that they've served on these committees and talk about their experience in that respect, but just not using if you can't use it as a ballot designation, you shouldn't be able to use it in your campaign materials. That's all I would advocate for. Thank you.
Director Biden has her hands up.
Go ahead, Mr. Biden.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add my position on this as well. So on this issue, I don't have context either. I do understand that there's a perception that members of our organization have misused their participation or misstated their participation. I urge the board to be cautious on this. I am not an elected official, but I've done a fair amount of work with election law. Again, I'm an engineer, not a lawyer. I would urge us to be cautious and simply refer to election law. Can't go wrong if you refer back to election law. Then this committee, or excuse me, this board can determine whether or not we feel whatever grievance someone has, whatever action they took, meets the letter of the election law. So to go no further than to say in conformance with election law would be my advice.
Thank you.
Director Biden, I have a concern with that, a legal concern, because I don't think that this board should be putting itself in the position of deciding what complies with election law or not. There's already a person designated by statute to do that, which is the elections official.
And can we tap into that person in a timely manner?
Well, yeah, there's various options to talk to that person ahead of the election. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Director Cooper has his hand up.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
just in response to Mr. Bryden, dealing with the elections people at election time, there's about a 2-week period there when people submit their ballot statement, or maybe just a few days. It's not even a week, and they don't take the issue on. They just say, "Sorry, you'll have to take that to court." So what we don't want to do is to have to do that. Have whoever's running has to do that. It's not us. And this is just saying that we ask you to be on a stakeholder advisory committee. This is not a profession. This is not an occupation, and you should treat it as such.
Understood.
And you should be honest in what you're doing. I agree with Mr. Martin that where it says or included in campaign materials, maybe we just say or included in campaign materials as a profession or occupation, because then that's out and out not true. It's not a profession. It's not an occupation. But with that, I would sure like to see us get this moving today. I hope so.
President Atkins,
Yes.
it looks like we have further public comments. Would you mind opening it back up to the public comments?
Is it Ms. Fortner with her 1:30?
It is Ms. Fortner, and it looks like also Ms. Planbeck.
Okay, well, Ms. Planbeck's used her 3 minutes. We'll give Ms. Fortner her other 1:30. Go ahead.
Okay. Give me 1 second, please. Just gonna start the clock. Go ahead, Ms. Fortner.
Yeah, I just want to address a couple of things here really quick. First of all, to alleviate Vice President Natoli and Director Bryden's concerns, this was run through the election code. This was a challenged ballot designation. We defended our ballot designation and it was accepted by the county election officials. I want to disagree with Director Cooper's assertion that they blow these off because of they don't have the time or they don't have the attention. That is incorrect information. I have worked on plenty of campaigns where we have had plenty of ballot designation challenges, and some of them have gone to court, others have not. And it's never been because they didn't have the time or they didn't want to be bothered by a challenge or bringing forth suit against a ballot designation. The other thing that I wanted to address is that I'm very disappointed in Director Goodsite, who said that she was going to recuse from these matters, and yet here she is commenting and suggesting, even when we know that it's her seat that they are most disappointed in not preserving. So I will cede back my 5 seconds, but it was run through the election code for both of you that had those concerns, and they were upheld. We were able to keep our ballot designations.
Thank you, Ms. Fortner. Okay, if there's nothing further from the board.
I need to correct that.
Okay, go ahead.
As Mr. Cooper said, the only legal challenge to a ballot designation is by filing a writ of mandate. The other is administrative, and it is with the staff. There is, I think, at most a 14-day period to retain a lawyer and file a writ of mandate. And then at that point, it can be upheld or it can be denied, but it's a very tight window and it does require a lawyer. And there was no lawyer retained in this case. It was an administrative ask by one of the fellow stakeholder advisory committee members. And administratively, he never got a response. I guess the other stakeholder members did, but it was not challenged legally and it was not upheld legally. That's all.
Thank you for the clarification. Anything further from the board?
We have Director Martin with his hands up.
Go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Okay, so one more response to the issue of whether a ballot designation is violated by using a volunteer stakeholder position. I would ask Councilman Bunn, according to the plain reading of the election law, a ballot designation is an occupation or a profession, is it not?
Well, it adds the nonprofit in another place, the nonprofit service,
Well, then.
the volunteer
it's-
service.
All right. But I think,
But it does have to be your principal activity
okay.
of
all
that
right.
type.
Okay, so I'm still comfortable with prohibiting a ballot statement because we all know how important a ballot statement is, a ballot designation. Let's not confuse the two, a ballot statement, a ballot designation. And I would definitely support prohibiting the use of the ballot designation. And I would still prefer to strike the language about other campaign material because I think that's going too far.
I accept that and agree with you, Mr. Martin. The ballot designation has to be a principal occupation or vocation, but you ought to be able to speak to in your ballot statement about your volunteer activities, especially if it has to do with water and you're running for a water board position. So I have no particular problem with that. So nothing further from the board. I'll entertain a motion to move this resolution forward.
President Atkins,
Yes.
do you wish to give Ms. Planbeck another public comment? You have you're muted, President Atkins.
Sorry, she had her 3 minutes and so did Ms. Fortner. So we're going to move on.
Thank you,
Let's move
President
to-
Atkins.
We're on 3.2. I'll entertain a motion to move this resolution forward.
This is Director Cooper. I would so move the resolution with striking the included in the campaign materials from line bullet item number 5.
Is there a second?
Director Gibbs has his hand up.
Go ahead, Mr. Gibbs.
President Atkins, just one
Well,
point.
you need to have a second first. Hold on. You
Oh,
can't have
yeah.
further discussion without a second.
Is there a second? I will second.
I will second it.
Mr. Martin, go ahead. Okay, so we have a primary motion by Mr. Cooper and a second by Mr. Martin. Mr. Gibbs, go ahead.
Hey, but just one clarification. I know we're changing the language on the resolution. Do we need to change the language on the advisory committee agreement that they're going to be signing? We'll have to change that as well, correct?
I think that's
Yes.
right, Mr. Bunn, is that correct?
Yes, you would.
Okay,
Then,
that's fine.
And I wanted to make sure we talked about one other possible amendment, which was to include as defined in the elections code. I understand, Director Cooper, that you're not proposing to add that language, correct?
No.
Okay. With that, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board?
President Atkins, do I need to offer an amendment to the motion for removing the or to use it in campaign materials off of the stakeholder advisory committee agreement form?
Mr. Bunn?
No, assuming that Director Cooper agrees that that's what he meant, we'll take that as the motion.
Yes, they would read the same on both forms.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Nothing further from the board. Uni, please take roll.
Director Biden, your vote.
Yes.
Director Cooper, your vote.
Yes.
Director Gibbs, your vote.
Aye.
Director Gutzeit, your vote.
Yes.
Director Martin, your vote.
Yes.
Vice President Atola, your vote.
Aye.
President Atkins, your vote.
Yes. Let's move on to 3.3, status update of Sustainable Groundwater Management Plan implementation activities. Mr. Dragoots.
Thank you, President Atkins. I'll be presenting item 3.3 today. It is an information item. And you have the written report in the agenda package. I did not develop a PowerPoint for it. I thought we'd just discuss it, given that we've had so many meetings recently, including with your board, related to GSP development. So I'll hit the high notes, and then if you've got questions or if you'd like to discuss it, certainly we can do that. The technical team and the stakeholder team continue to move forward, doing what we need to do to keep the process working well, to keep documents flowing. There have been a number of technical documents prepared. As you can see in the board report, outreach has been going on in earnest. We recently had a public workshop March 10th and a follow-up meeting with the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. We're also looking to schedule a special Stakeholder Advisory Committee in April to give the committee more of an introduction to the monitoring plan. That was something that they had requested. And I think that we'll take that opportunity then to get their consensus as a committee on some other issues as well. Moving on to the fiscal, this is an update. We've now invoiced about $675,000 back to the Department of Water Resources for the work we've done. This is in line with the 2 grants that we've received. In terms of our look ahead, there are a number of things happening in the next 6 months. You know, we're in April now. The draft GSP is scheduled to be released in August. And so a lot of these items that follow, task 2, 3, et cetera, will be rolled up in the draft GSP in August. Let me just hit some of the high points on those. Task 2, we're working on the monitoring plan development right now. Task 3 is largely complete. Task 4, site access agreements continue to move forward. We do have the agreement with the city. The county is still not released it. I've requested a meeting with the supervisor of that department. I'll keep you posted on that. Task 5, water budget development. That work is also nearing completion. Task 6, the hydrogeologic conceptual model, final edits are being made to that report. Task 7, the sustainable management criteria. We did have a workshop March 10th. We had a nice discussion with your board a couple weeks ago on this, and we continue to work on this and move forward. We'll be moving into task 8, developing projects and management actions. And as you recall, those are things which are considered necessary to reach sustainability within the 20-year implementation period. We'll be coming back to your board to give you an update on that report when it's available, probably in June. More with outreach, we did complete the workshop cycle, or we will be completing the workshop cycle on projects and management actions coming up, and working on rolling out the draft GSP in August. And in terms of challenges, it's the usual things we've been facing, although we're making progress. So site access, we plan to get going with the county's final approval this summer. In terms of where are we going to go, what are we going to do? Right now, we'll be working in the city and the unincorporated area. We do not have permission of the private owner, largely west of I-5, to install monitoring equipment. We'll continue to look at other options, but right now we think it's unlikely that such a request would be granted. And so that will create a data gap for the GSP that we'll have to fill in the future. And that's it in a nutshell with some of the challenges. We know the next item, Kathy's going to talk about a proposal to use contingency funding for the CV strategies contract. And that's it, President Atkins. We're working, we're getting things done, and this is a quick roll up of the status.
Thank you, Mr. Vergoots. Well done. Any comments or questions from the board?
Director Goodside has her hand up.
Go ahead.
Just real quick, these data gaps, I believe it was explained a little more in our last meeting, but data gap doesn't mean we can't proceed, correct? It means that it's identified and we'll continue to pursue either that option or a substitute way of getting the data. So I want to check my understanding on that. And then number two, do we have any eminent domain authority as an agency to get the data if we don't have alternatives?
So thank you. First question you asked, you are absolutely right. Data gaps do not mean that we cannot proceed. What it means is that we will identify them as such and describe our plan to fill them over time. In terms of eminent domain, I think I'd turn that over to counsel or Mr. Cole for that.
Comments, gentlemen?
Mr. Bunn, you want to take it, or I mean, I'll take a stab at it. Generally, because we're a joint powers authority, that we come together with the powers of the agencies that form from that authority. So I would answer probably in the affirmative that we most likely do have eminent domain powers, but Mr. Bunn can tell me if I'm wrong.
I agree, we do have that, but of course that's a drawn out and potentially expensive process.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from the board?
Director Martin has his hand up.
Go ahead, sir.
No, President Atkins, I just wanted to take an opportunity to recognize the effort that's been put forth by Rick and the whole team. A very, very comprehensive list of tasks that have been accomplished and still more to go. Appreciate the effort. It's great to be nearing the completion of at least the draft GSP. That's going to be a real milestone for this agency. And I want to thank you for your very professional, thorough effort in getting this done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Cooper has his hand up.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Yes, Rick, you're saying that we've had some delays with the county and getting them on board with some of what we need. Is there anything that the members of this board, either Director Bryden or Director Natoli, can do to help that process along before you have to go meet with their staff?
Happy to discuss it. We're working with County Public Works, and I know Director Bryden wears that hat, so perhaps we can have an offline discussion with that if that would be appropriate.
I think with the joint powers authority like this, that's the advantage to having these people all on the same board. So I would certainly use those resources that you have.
Thank you, Director Cooper. We'll be talking, Director Bryden.
Good. Encourage that communication. Anything further from the board? Public comment on this item?
Is there any public comment at this time? Does not appear to be any public comment.
Thank you, Uni. Let's move on to 3.4, presented by Kathy Martin. Approval to use contingency funds for groundwater sustainability plan outreach consultant CV strategies. Go ahead, Ms. Martin.
Thank you, President Atkins. Good afternoon, everybody. As you know, we have been deeply involved in outreach, both to the general public and through our stakeholder advisory committee since day one of this project. And while there is a finish line in sight, there is still much more work to be done. The original contract with CV Strategies was $450,000. And while we have not had a need to work out of scope per se, there has been a lot more of what we had envisioned from the beginning. In particular, the original contract anticipated about 6 stakeholder advisory committee meetings, roughly 1 for each of the technical memorandums that would be coming out. But as we talked with among our staff and consultant team, and then the stakeholders after they were seated, we realized that we needed quite a bit more. And so we do at least 2 per tech memo. In addition, the more meaty subjects of the sustainable management criteria and still to come, the project and management actions have evolved to include several more brainstorming workshop style meetings with the stakeholder advisory committee prior to bringing it to a public workshop setting. In the end, we anticipate we will have held as many as 20 SAC meetings as opposed to the originally anticipated 6. We also have turned to the expertise of CV Strategies staff on a few occasions for writing assistance in the tech memos themselves to really give it a once-over, aiming for that plain language, plain English flavor to them to make them more understandable to the general public. So because of those things I've described, we are seeking authorization to use the contingency funds up to the amount of $22,500. Between the remaining contract and the identified contingency funds, we have no doubt we can get through the end of the plan adoption and the end of January 2022. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Open it to the board.
Director Gutzeit has her hand up.
Go ahead, Ms. Goodside.
Do we have any need for those contingency funds for other contracts, or do we think the other ones are pretty solid and this is would be the sole need for the contingency funds?
We built the original budget so that each contract had a contingency fund. So
Okay.
GSI had their own, and this one is strictly identified just for outreach activities.
Okay, thank you.
President Natoli has her hand up.
Go ahead, Vice President.
I'm withdrawing my question.
Okay.
Okay. Anything further from the board? Public comment.
There is no public comment at this time.
Thank you. Entertain a motion to approve this 22,005.
Vice President Natoli, so moved.
Martin seconds.
Okay, we have a first and a second. You have that, Uni?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Director Biden, your vote?
Yes.
Director Cooper, your vote?
Yes.
Director Gibbs, your vote?
Aye.
Director Gutzeit, your vote?
Yes.
Director Martin, your vote?
Yes.
Vice President Natoli, your vote?
Aye.
President Atkins, your vote?
Yes.
Thank you. This item passed.
We have another information item 3.5 presented by Mr. Rick Vergutz, a status update on the integrated regional water management work and Measure W. I'm sure it's going to be shorter than the last one. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Vergutz.
Thank you, President Atkins. Uni, can you open up that presentation? And yes, it will be brief, President Atkins.
Rick, you're welcome to share your screen if you like.
I am using a different computer right now.
Okay.
Because my other one was acting up. So if you give me a minute, well, you know what? Here's another option. Uni, can you open it up quickly?
I can. Give me 1 second. Let me share my
you.
screen.
And while you're doing that, I'll just begin. So every quarter, with the exception of last quarter, we've been giving updates to your board on this because we've had questions about, the difference between Measure W and IRWIM and the GSA. And so this is just a quick update on where we're seeing alignment and opportunities for partnering and grant applications moving forward. Uni, I think what we'll do is, are you ready to just tab through these, Uni?
I am.
Okay, next slide, please. These are the 3 program areas. You've seen this before. There's plenty of overlap. Next slide. So from the GSA perspective, your board is well aware of what the GSA is doing. And of course, we're moving into developing the monitoring program and projects and management actions. Next slide. Oh, you had it just right, and then you adjusted it. From the Upper Santa Clara IRWM perspective, that group is working on finalizing the grant agreement for the round 1 grant. We do not have the draft grant agreement yet. Hope to get all this wrapped up, though, as soon as possible. There will be a future round 2 funding coming down the line. The Department of Water Resources has a workshop coming up in May to talk about the next steps. So the proposal solicitation package, timing, those kinds of things. Next slide. Safe Clean Water Program. You know, there have been 2 stormwater recharge projects approved. They also have their own call for projects, just like the IRWM program. Their call for projects are currently every July. There's one taking place right now. The GSA doesn't know enough in terms of projects and management actions to propose anything for that group, but perhaps in July next year we will. Next slide, please. And so we've got a lot of alignment with the programs right now, especially related to recharge projects, either groundwater or stormwater and Arundo removal. Next slide, Uni. That alignment's going to continue. You know, these are groups doing the same kind of thing. So in the future, we'll be sharing the same interests, looking for opportunities to apply for grants or partnering. One of the things that we're seeing develop now is there may be an opportunity for the GSA to work with IRWIM for some of the monitoring that we're doing with monitoring that they may be doing, say, in regards to Arundo. Next slide, Uni. Okay, final slide. So in terms of timing, fall 2021, your board, stakeholders will have a good understanding of the potential projects and management actions that would be included in the GSP. It's possible that there might be something in that document that could be folded into a grant request for the IRWIM grant application. It's also possible that in 2022, the GSA may be able to find something that fits well with the Safe Clean Water program. And, you know, it's not all about grants. You know, also with these organizations working in similar fashions, there can be other opportunities to partner as well. So we'll keep our eyes open for that. And that concludes my presentation, President Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Vagutz. Any comments, questions on the part of the board?
Director Gutzeit has her hand up.
Go ahead, Ms. Gutzeit.
I just want to thank the staff and point out, you know, channeling Director Mortensen from SCV Water, 10 million of grants in excess of that is terrific. And I appreciate all the eyes on the moving parts to bring these projects to the Valley, because, you know, it's one thing to talk about projects. It's another thing to fund them and do them. So thank you.
You bet.
Director Biden has his hand up.
Go ahead, Mr. Biden.
This raising hands and unmuting self is complicated. So, Mr. Vagutz, I wanted to commend you on noticing the connection between IRWIM, between Safe Clean Water, and between our Groundwater Sustainability Agency. I can speak as to the intent of Measure W, now Safe Clean Water, and that was it's absolutely meant to be connected. And I might offer some advice for this group and for our parent agencies. One of the things that was considered as Measure W was being developed, now Safe Clean Water, was the evolution of the IRWIMP program. IRWIMP has a number of flaws with it, most notably that there's no steady funding source, right? We're just at the state's whim for funding. One of the hopes for safe, clean water was that it would become the evolution of IRWIMP, what IRWIMP was meant to be. And I think it's in all of our best interests to always look for those connections, to reinforce them. And then I might offer some advice. The extent to which we can merge these agencies, and there's statutory limitations to what we can do, but our ability to kind of merge these groups into one water resources planning group, I think would be in our benefit. It's not only helpful for grants, but it's better for truly integrated regional water management. So just something to take back to our parent organizations. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Biden. Anything further from the board? I wanted to say, Mr. Vergoots, to you and your team, thank you so much for all you're doing. From integrated regional water to GSP, all of it, it's a yeoman's job you're doing, and I appreciate the effort and the coordination and the attention to detail. Thank you. With that, that was a motion. That was a information item. We are going to move on to
President Atkins?
public comment. On this
Yes.
one. Thank you.
There is
Nice
a public
catch, Jeannie.
comment. Give me
There
one
is
second. Ms. Cattell, go ahead with your public comment.
Thank you. It's a very quick one. I just wanted to say that the comment by Director Biden about not just coordinating, but actually integrating the various agencies that are that are facets of exactly the same thing is a wonderful thing, a wonderful idea, and it really should be implemented in some way. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Nothing further from the public?
Does not appear to be any.
Okay. All right. Then let's move on to item 3.6. Mr. Cole is going to talk about the status update on Bouquet Canyon Creek. Go ahead, Mr. Cole.
Yeah, thank you, President Atkins. This item is going to be verbal. It's just meant to update this group on the Bouquet Canyon release status. I think you'll remember the last time we really talked about it in depth here at the GSA was to draft a letter for the president's signature to send us SCV water and requesting that SCV water engage in this topic and try to help move it forward. And so we did have a presentation at SCV Water. I'd say, it was an interesting discussion with our board there about how proactive of a role the water agency should play in trying to get the Bouquet Canyon releases moving forward. I think there was definitely interest in participating, in the stakeholder group that has been formed to do that. We had an in-depth presentation to the board that kind of walked through the history of even when the reservoir was constructed and the historical nature of the releases and how they've ebbed and flowed over time and the challenges that are currently presented in getting those releases to continue. We've also staff, I'll say staff of the GSA, it kind of gets blurred a little bit on this one with the water agency and the nature of, we've been meeting with the stakeholders and there's a broad list of stakeholders on this issue. We just talked, as Director Bryden brought up in the last presentation, this idea of, not single agencies can resolve these issues anymore. And so this idea of coordination and integration to try and break loose the issues that face this challenge are real. And this is just an example of a project basically that is trying to deal with that. And so LA County Public Works is the lead, mainly flood control, but the roadway gets wrapped into this discussion really significantly itself. So the Bouquet Canyon Road and the improvements that could be made to that, just the infrastructure of the road itself to help with this issue. So they're involved. A familiar name and face, Adam Ariki. This now falls under his jurisdiction. So we were able to meet with Adam and his team. They are moving the project forward. I would say COVID has hit this one pretty hard. There was a lot of, kind of jurisdictional meetings and discussions going on with California Fish and Wildlife, the Federal Fish and Wildlife, the Forest Service. And so the stakeholder list goes on and on because of the jurisdictional boundaries that this crosses. Goes into the forestry boundary, for instance, and then so that brings on a whole different level of coordination for the project. But we're continuing to meet with the group. The main proposal that's on the table right now is to try and move forward an interim solution to where there could be some call them interim improvements done to the creek area that would allow for additional releases without impacting the roadway. So those are being discussed. There is a draft plan that Public Works has put together that is substantial, and it talks about the overarching challenges of the long-term solution for this project. Excuse me. So, ultimately, when you look at the long-term solution, anybody that's been up Bouquet, they know the challenge, right? You're going to get fires, you're going to get erosion, you're going to get stuff that continually will go into the creek. Even if you clean it today, a year from now, when we have another fire, or 5 years from now, it's going to have those issues again. And so I think the county has done a really good job of trying to look at what that longer term solution would look like, the improvements that would be necessary, both to the kind of creek infrastructure as well as the roadway infrastructure. And as you can imagine, when you start doing that, when you look at kind of that holistic solution, it is not cheap. And so there will have to be ultimately a funding strategy that is going to have to be put in place to, I think, really implement the long-term solution. One other activity that's going on that you may have heard or not heard, the water agency is pursuing a pipeline improvement up Bouquet Canyon. So it will actually go up all the way to Vasquez, where the Lark Ranch is located. That's a grant funded project that will be able to bring potable water supplies, fire protection, those types of things to that area of the community that hasn't had them before. The Lark Ranch itself is considered disadvantaged along with Lily of the Valley Mobile Home Park that is going to be a part of that project. That improvement is several $million, but as I mentioned, it has been, it's in the process of being approved for grant funding, and we think that actually is going to come to fruition towards the latter part of this year, and construction starting shortly thereafter. So that won't fix, all the issues, but it will provide the ability for those that are along that line, if they choose to do so, to eventually connect and alleviate some of the pressure on the groundwater supplies. I think, both at the water agency and here, we're interested in seeing those releases happen again. And so that's where our focus is. A little bit on the next steps. I think you'll see us, the staff here, the GSA, continue to engage with the lead agency, which is Public Works, and others like United Water Conservation District, who actually holds the contract with LADWP for this release. And we're talking with them about kind of the long-term solutions of that as well. I think I'll stop there. I'll be happy to answer any specific questions you have on it. resource wise right now, I will say our focus is on the groundwater sustainability planning effort that we're fully engaged in right now. But we're interested in seeing where we can help the county try and break some things loose and move those forward with the broader stakeholder group. So that's all I have for you today.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Anything from the board on this item? I appreciate the work you're doing as a staff, and really am looking forward to some resolutions that would be terrific for this particular situation, because it's a problem waiting to happen. So with that, we'll open it to public comment.
There is no public comment at this time.
Then we'll move on to item 3.7, a postponement of the GSA meeting for July 5th. Mr. Vergoots.
Thank you, President Atkins. This is self-explanatory. We have a timing issue, and we're recommending that your board postpone the regular meeting of July 5th and reschedule it to July 12th.
Thank you, sir. Anything from the board on this?
I'll move the recommended action.
Is there a second?
Foley, I'll second.
Good. You have that, Uni?
Yes, I do.
Anything further from the board on this? Public comment?
There is no public comment.
Please call the roll, Uni.
Director Biden, your vote.
Yes.
Director Cooper, your vote.
Yes.
Director Gibbs, your vote.
Aye.
Director Gutzeit, your vote.
Yes.
Director Martin, your vote.
Yes.
Vice President Natoli, your vote.
Aye.
President Atkins, your vote.
Yes.
Thank you. This item passed.
We'll move on to item 4, appointment of board president and vice president. Mr. Bunn, it says here that you will facilitate if need be, but I'm wondering if we just don't have a slate that could be put forward by one of the board members.
Yes, that's correct. It did sound from the prior discussion as if there might be a slate, and it's always appropriate to move that.
Do I hear a slate being put forward by any of the board?
Director Martin has his hand up.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Director Cooper on to make a motion, but I would like to make a motion that we nominate Vice President Tolley for the president position and Director Gutzeit for the vice president position.
We'll second that, Director Cooper. You're muted.
Any other nominations from the floor or discussion? Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Okay, if there's nothing further, I guess I have to open this to public comment, don't I, Uni? Don't I, Mr. Bunn?
Yes, you do.
Okay, it's open to public comment then. Uni?
Are there many members of the public who wish to make a comment at this time? It appears there is no public comment.
Thank you. Then if there's no other nominations, let's go ahead and call for the vote. Uni, go ahead.
Director Biden, your vote.
Yes.
Director Cooper, your vote.
Yes.
Director Gibbs, your vote.
Aye.
Director Gutzeit, your vote.
Yes.
Director Martin, your vote.
Enthusiastic, yes.
Vice President Natoli, your vote.
Aye.
President Atkins, your vote.
Absolutely, yes.
Congratulations, Vice President Natoli, your president, and Vice President Gutzeit.
Here's the gavel. Go ahead, Gina.
Thank you.
And thank you, President Atkins, for your service as chairman of this board.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Wonderful job. Moving on to item 5, consideration of possible future agenda items. Do I hear anything from the board?
I would like to see Bouquet Canyon stay on our agenda for a while until we, at least every other month, until we have some resolution, please.
Is there any other comment from the board? I think that makes sense. And do we have any suggestions from the public as to possible future agenda items?
There is no public comment.
Right, before we adjourn, I just have a question. We met as a special board on March 25th. On March 30th, I submitted 16 questions and one suggestion. I'm not sure who would answer this, whether it would be Mr. Cole or Mr. Viergoots. When could we expect, and I looked today, I did not see my questions posted on the GSA website. I'm wondering when that will be posted and when we might expect to see some answers.
Mr. Cole, I might be closer to that one than you. We expect to have the response up in a couple days. We've been through them. I've been through them. The GSI team has been through them. We're going to have CV strategies take a quick look to make sure that we are using the right level of plain English, because I know this is a document that's for everybody, right? So a couple days is my expectation. And when it's done, Uni will post it on the website as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Viergoots. With
You're
that, I always like to ask, Madam Secretary, when is our next scheduled board meeting?
That would be July 12th, because you guys just approved that.
Very good. With that, I want to thank everyone for attending today. And as always, these are very instructional, informative meetings. And I appreciate everyone's participation today, especially members of the public. With that, I hope everyone had a wonderful Easter, and I wish everyone a good day and continued health. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.